Hi everybody, welcome and thank you so much for checking out my channel today. My name is Tanny and I am an independent author and I just really love great stories. So on this channel I talk about writing, books I've enjoyed, and lessons I've learned on my publishing journey. Today I thought I would share a little bit about my outlining process and how I use the Save the Cat outlining method and also a free online program called Trello to outline my books. I believe Trello was actually created for companies and workplaces to kind of help organize projects and things like that. But I've found that it actually works really well for outlining a novel also. I want to give credit to Megan Tennant for kind of introducing me to Trello and how she uses Trello to outline her books. I think she made a video about it a couple of years ago and I saw it and immediately thought that it was something that would be useful to me and tried it out. And it works really well for me and I've been using it for everything I've outlined ever since. I will also link Megan's video in the description if you want to check that out. Before we get into the actual outlining process, let me just share a little bit about why I like Trello and why I like the Save the Cat structure. A lot of the times we talk about writers falling into two camps, right? You're either a plotter, where you outline everything and plan everything before you write, or you're a pantser, where you don't plan anything and you just sit down and write and the story kind of takes shape as you're going along. I am definitely a planner. To some extent, I've always been that way, but over the years, I've become even more of a planner. I like to have all of the pieces kind of laid out in front of me so that when I'm writing, I just have to kind of go in and fill in the parts that aren't outlined and connect the dots in a way that makes sense. First drafts are really hard for me, but a good outline will just help me stay on track and stay organized so that I can get through the first draft without too much frustration, because I already know what needs to happen and how to get from point A to point B all the way through the end of the story. Because outlining is so important to my writing process, I need something that's going to work really well for me and help me organize my outlines and keep everything laid out in a way that I can find stuff easily and refer back to it very easily. And then the Save the Cat method is not something that I always knew about or something that I've used with all of my books, but it does feel very intuitive. And I think even some of the early books that I've written, I can look back on them and see how I think they would definitely fit into the Save the Cat model. And I think it's something that is probably familiar to a lot of us because we've seen it so many times in movies and other books that get published and things like that. I started using the Save the Cat method with Calico Thunder Rides Again. And as I was doing that, I found that it worked really well and it surprisingly just kind of made everything a lot easier for me. I didn't have to spend so much time thinking about what needs to happen here and exactly what order things should be in, because I already had this structure that kind of was a guideline. It just gave me a blueprint and some new ideas to consider as I was outlining that book and then any future books that I've outlined. There is definitely a established structure to Save the Cat, but I also feel like it gives you a lot of flexibility and creative freedom as far as how you decide to implement that in a way that works best for your story. There are a lot of really great story structures out there. I'm not trying to say that this one is better than the others. Honestly, I haven't really experienced or analyzed a ton of other story structures out there. I kind of just stumbled into Save the Cat, and like I said, it feels very intuitive to me. So I've kind of just stuck with that one and used that to outline some of the other books that I've been working on since then. So now let's go ahead and open up Trello and I will show you how I like to use that with Save the Cat to outline my novels. After you create an account and sign in, you get to this workspace that has all of your boards and projects on it. If you just do the free account, then you get 10 boards, which has been plenty for me. You can either go and create a new board right here, or you can choose one of the existing ones. For this one, we're going to use this demo board that I created for my YA fantasy novel outline. So once you get into your board, up here on the top menu, you have this home button that will take you back to your workspace if you want to go back. You also have this right next to it, boards, which allows you to switch between different boards if you want to go somewhere else. This has been really useful to me as I've been working on Riven Empire, which is the sequel to Tethered Spirits. A lot of the times there will be things that I need to refer back to from one book to the next, so I can just really quickly switch between them, and that's been really useful. Then if we go down below that top menu, we have the name of your project. So you can go in here and change the name if you want to. And then if you hit enter, it will save that name for you. This star next to it, if you click it, it will show that board at the top of your list. So whatever project I'm working on currently, I will usually have that one starred just so that I can find it really easily. It's right there at the top where I need it. You can also go over here to where it says private, and you can change that to make it public. You can also go in here on invite and invite other people to use this board if you want to. I think this would be really helpful, like if you're collaborating with somebody on a project, or if you're, co-writing something, then you can invite them to this board so that they can see everything and work on it together. Over here under show menu, you can change some of the settings, including changing the background, which is always super fun for me. So this is one of the visual elements that I find really fun and interesting about Trello. You can go through and just search anything that you want. Tethered Spirits has kind of a forest setting a lot of the places that the characters travel, and so we can pick any of these forest pictures to be our background, and then it will just change that and update it. If you have the paid version, apparently it will let you upload your own photo right here. I don't have that, but there's a ton of different photos that you can choose from. So just find something that you like, and that's really easy to change. Or if you would rather, you can also pick a color and just choose like a solid color to use instead. But I like the photos, so we're just gonna go back to kind of a foresty photo. Okay, so those are just kind of the basic settings that you can change and play around with. Let's get into kind of the actual outline itself and how I organize it. So each of these big columns here are different lists that you can create. If you go all the way over to the right, it'll always be on the right side, but you can add another list right here. If you want to, you can just enter the title and then add the list, and we can see that it's right here. The way that I like to use the lists are just for different sections or categories to help me get organized with some of the characters you can see right here, or I have a whole list about the magic system and world building events that happen before the story really gets started, just to help me keep all of that in one place and organized. And then I have this kind of miscellaneous list right here for just different plot ideas that I have, but I'm not sure where they fit yet. All of these first columns are things that are not part of the actual outline, but I use them for planning, and I like to keep them in here just for easy reference so that I can pull them up really quickly. And then over here, these lists are the actual outline. So Save the Cat uses a 3-act structure. So I have lists for Act 1, Act 2, and then Act 3. This one over here, we're just going to delete because we don't actually need it. You don't delete stuff on Trello. There's like not a delete button, but if you click archive, then it will disappear. Let's look at this first list over here for characters. You can add cards to your list. So if you go down to the bottom of the list, there will be this option to add a card. And if you just click that, then it will pop up and you can add a title. We'll just call it new character, and we would just put that right there. If you go into the actual card, you can add more details and descriptions, and you can also add an attachment or a cover image, either just by uploading your own or searching their database. If you go up here and click this little pencil in the corner, you can edit the labels as well, and I really like that feature because I have all of my characters color coded right here. You can create a new label, just add the character's name, and then it will show up on the list. If I wanted to change this one, I could change it. I could make him a new color. I could delete that label. So there's just a lot of different things that you can do with that. But I use that to help me get organized in my actual outline, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. If you open the card, you get this description right here. If you edit the description, then you can go through and type out whatever you need to for that character. And then on the attachments, you can add other image attachments or other file attachments if you want to. You can also go up here to the cover option, and this is where we can, if we remove that cover, then we can go right here to where it says cover on the side, and you can upload a cover image, or you can search one down here, search for photos. This is the one that I had uploaded for Saya already, so we'll just put that back on there. And then that one's done, so we can just close out of it, and that's saved and ready to go. You can do that for all the characters. These ones are ones that I just made the aesthetic collage for the character and then uploaded that. And then I have all of them labeled. This is a Mars card, so it's labeled Amar, but if I take that off, then it disappears and it's not labeled with that green bar anymore. I can just click it again to put it back on, and then once you click out of that, then it will just save it. If we go over here to the outline, like I said, we have lists for Act 1, Act 2, and Act 3. All of the cards that I have on here match up with different beats for Save the Cat. But I also have tried to put them in chronological order of the story as much as possible. So some things don't exactly match up, and that's kind of the flexibility of Save the Cat. It is more or less following that structure and everything happening, within the acceptable range for what percentage of the story certain beats should happen. But there's a little flexibility there. So for Tethered Spirits, I'm working with 3 main characters. There's Amar and Aleda and Kasari, and they all kind of have their own beat sheet and their own Save the Cat arc throughout the story, which is why you see that I have, this opening image and setup listed out 3 times. There's one that kind of happens for Amar, and then there's one that happens for Aleda, and then there's one that happens for Kasari. And this is where that color coding comes in super handy, because if I'm just trying to find like Amar's stuff, I can go through and just see, okay, all these things with the green label that say Amar, those are like all his things. All the blue labels are Kasari. I can just glance through really easily and find all of her stuff. Some of the beats overlap. Theme stated beat right here. A lot of the fun and games, that's all kind of interwoven and overlapping. So I just have all 3 of them labeled on here, and that's fine. Within each of these cards, if we click on this one and open it up, then I will kind of break things down a little further by chapter. These are some things that line up with Save the Cat that I want to make sure that I include in the book. And then this chapter 1, Amar's point of view, and I just have all the plot events listed out. So especially in the beginning, it's a little disorganized, but I try to keep everything in chronological order as much as possible. Not everyone outlines their book by chapters. I know a lot of writers will just write the entire book and then kind of figure out where the chapter breaks go later. That's just kind of how my brain works. It tends to sort things into chapters anyways, especially where I have a book like this where every chapter is a different character's point of view. It makes sense for me to break things up into chapters because I need to decide before I even start writing, whose point of view are we going to be in for this particular scene. Sometimes that's really easy. If there's only one point of view character present, then obviously we'll be sharing the story from that character's point of view. But sometimes there's more than one, so then I have to decide. If you're having trouble figuring out whose point of view a scene should be in, I like to ask myself some questions to help with that. Who's doing most of the action? Who has the most at stake in this scene? Who is going to be most impacted by what's happening? And I can usually make a decision based on that, but if not, I might write it out both ways and kind of see what works best. So getting into the Save the Cat stuff. In Act 1, we usually start with an opening image, which is just a before snapshot of your character and their world. And so for Amar, that happens right in chapter 1 in the story. But then, like I said, we also have an opening image and setup for Aleda as well, and then later on for Kasari. With the setup, the main character and the ordinary world are introduced, and we get to explore their status quo world and are introduced to some of the supporting characters. For me, the opening image and the setup often overlap, even though opening image is technically like the first thing in that beat sheet, and then setup is number 3. In between those, there's the theme. For me, that usually, it makes sense to put the opening image and the setup together. I feel like there's a lot of overlap between those, and so that's why I have those listed together, but you don't have to do it that way. For the theme stated, we are going to be introduced to the central theme or lesson of the story. In my actual outline, I have this listed out, what's the theme stated for Amar, for Kasari, for Aleda. It's different for all of them. They all have different things that they need to learn from the story and different ways that they need to change and grow. Then we get down here to the catalyst. That comes at a different point for Amar and Aleda, and then happens a little later for Kasari. So I have those listed out separately. This is what we often call the inciting incident, and something will happen that sets the story in motion. It prevents the characters from returning to the status quo that was established previously. And then after that, we have the debate, and that is a reaction to the catalyst where the characters will debate what to do next, or they might be kind of hesitant to take action. And so for Aleda, that's a little different, but then for Amar and Kasari, that overlaps a little more. And then after that, we move into Act 2. So in Act 2, we start with a break into 2, where the character decides to take up the challenge. A lot of the times for me, the debate and the break into 2 will overlap. After that, we go into the B story, and that's where a lot of the subplots kick in. We're introduced to characters who help the protagonists along their journey and in their transformation. These are often like multiple chapters or multiple scenes. And so, that's reflected in the outline. We have a couple chapters for each of those. And then we get into the fun and games, where we see the hero in their new world in the midst of their challenge or their journey. Sometimes they call this like the promise of the premise, because it represents the hook of the story and why readers picked it up in the first place. And so that's what's going to be shown in the fun and games section of the book. This is another story beat that's going to be multiple scenes and multiple chapters. You can see in my cards, I have like 3 chapters listed here, and then I have to go to the next card, and I have a few chapters listed here. That's because my outlines are really long and detailed. Trello does have a limit as far as how many words you can put in the description box. It's a lot. I looked at the actual outline before I deleted all the stuff for the demo, and I have more than 2,000 words in some sections, but then anything that goes kind of past that word limit, I had to create a new card for it. Then we get down finally to the midpoint. So this is where something happens to raise the stakes and push the character towards real change. It usually ends in either a false victory or a false defeat. This is one that is not so interwoven, so I have a different midpoint for Kasari's story, and then a different one for Mars, and a different one for Aleda's. Then after that, we have the bad guys close in. This is where things get progressively worse or progressively better, depending on how you ended with the midpoint. The character's deep-rooted flaws are closing in, and again, this is another section that has multiple chapters and multiple scenes. And then at the end of Act 2, we get to the all is lost moment and the dark night of the soul. These, for me, often overlap as well. They're 2 separate story beats, but the all is lost and the dark night of the soul, they are very closely related. The dark night of the soul beat is a direct response to the all is lost situation. And so I have those listed together. For the all is lost, that's where things go from bad to worst. This is usually the lowest point of the story, and the characters hit rock bottom. For me, this happens at different points for different characters as well. We have, the all is lost for Amar and Aleda over here. But then for Kasari, I have it a little later in the story. For Kasari, the other characters are already into Act 3 by the time her Dark Night of the Soul happens. So I went ahead and just moved her situation over to Act 3 just to keep everything in chronological order as much as possible. That's kind of just the challenge of working with multiple points of view. I think not everything is going to line up perfectly for each character, and that's okay. I don't think you need to try to force it to all line up perfectly. I don't think that's realistic, and if you're not flexible about it and you're trying to force things in a way that doesn't feel natural, I mean, that's going to be apparent to readers. They're going to be able to pick up on that, and it's going to feel very convoluted and just, it's not going to work as well. So try to be flexible with it. You know, if things line up as much as possible, that's great, but sometimes you're going to need to move pieces around, especially if you're, you know, doing crazy things like I am and trying to write entirely separate arcs and storylines for every single character. Just because we're using a story structure doesn't mean that it has to be super rigid. When we get into the Dark Night of the Soul, that's more of a reaction beat where the characters take time to process everything that's happened and kind of reflect on that. They're usually worse off than they were at the start of the novel, and they're faced with defeat. It's, you know, their darkest hour, and they're having to figure out what to do next. And with the break into 3, that's where they realize the truth that's been evading them all this time. This is kind of the aha moment, and where the theme of the story is realized and the character, you know, figures out what they have to do to fix all the problems that they created in Act 2 and to fix themselves. And then we get to the finale, and that's where the characters put their new awareness into action and prove that they have truly learned the theme, and they either conquer the bad guys, you know, or are defeated by the bad guys, depending on what kind of story you're writing. Save the Cat has kind of this even more broken down structure. We have gathering the team, and that's where they assemble allies to execute their plan. Then we have the execution of the plan, and this is where, you know, we go storm the castle, we put the plan into action to take down the bad guys, and then we have the High Tower surprise, which is kind of a twist. Things don't go according to plan, and the character really has to prove their worth and figure out how to deal with the new challenge. And then we have the dig deep down section, where they have to dig deep down and rise above. Usually it's something related to their flaws and the arc that they've experienced over the course of the book. It's something that they never would have been able to do at the start of the book, but they can now because of the journey that they've gone on and the lessons they've learned. Right after that, the execution of the new plan, and this is where they, you know, execute the new plan in triumph, or, you know, maybe they fail, but if that's the case, then usually there's some point to the failure and another lesson to be learned or something like that. So I have all of those different plot points listed out. This all happens at the climax of the book, and so the finale for all of the characters really comes together and overlaps, and so I don't need to separate that out into different beats. I can just write it out all together. Then we have the final image, which is a snapshot that mirrors or contrasts the opening image, and it shows who the character is after going through the journey of the story. And so I have that one for all of the characters as well. And that's it. That's it for the Save the Cat part. I know that wasn't super detailed. Save the Cat is much more detailed than that, and at some point maybe I will make a more thorough video about it, but for now that's just kind of how I break things up in my outline. I just wanted to show you guys that. Really quick, some other things that you can do. You can use the cards to set deadlines for yourself once you have your outline. So if you want to do, you know, have a deadline for yourself to have Act 1 written by a certain date, or to have, you know, the opening image and setup written by a certain date, you can go into that edit corner button again, and you can edit the dates, and you can set it for, you know, wherever you want. We'll just put it for August, and you can set a reminder for yourself. It just comes to your email, or I can remove the date if I want to. So then the date is removed, and we can save it. You can also take these cards and drag them around and reorganize stuff. So like if I wanted to go over here to some of the world building stuff and organize these alphabetically, which would make a lot of sense. I'm not sure why I didn't do that before, but we could do that. And Trello also automatically saves everything as you go along and as you're working, which is super nice. That about covers it. I would love to know any outlining tools that you've used in the past that have really worked well for you, so be sure to leave a comment and let me know. At some point, I might like to do a more in-depth breakdown of Save the Cat using an outline like this, probably for a story that most people already know and are familiar with, so that we're not spoiling anything and you guys can kind of follow along and understand where the different beats line up and how that looks in an actual story. So if that's something that you'd be interested in, please let me know. Don't forget to hit the like button and please subscribe and ring the bell if you want to see more videos like this in the future. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a fantastic day and I will see you next time. Bye.